Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase. Part 46, Semantic Tri-Unity. Remember the language we are learning. There is one field, phi, the holophase, one continuous cyclic movement from which all of reality unfolds. When phi begins to change, its first derivatives appear, and with them, the three dimensions show themselves at once. Time as omega, space as k, and motion as v, built from both. Every higher derivative is a finer question about how phi changes, and each one casts three shadows together: a time shadow, a space shadow, and a motion shadow. These echoes mix and weave into one another, forming the patterns we call fields, particles, bodies, thoughts, and worlds. In this picture, everything that exists is a living tapestry of phi, endlessly echoing through its derivatives and their dimensional shadows. Today, we listen to just one of those echoes. Our climb through the heart of meaning has brought us to a great summit. In this chapter, at the center of Ep.7, we have explored the three dimensions of semantic expression. We saw time as meaning, the universe's narrative told in rhythm. We saw space as meaning, its declarations written in form. And we saw motion as meaning, the actions that weave narrative and form together. We studied each pillar on its own so we could feel its flavor clearly. But now, we must take the final, crucial step. We must see them not as three separate pillars, but as three inseparable faces of a single living structure. Today, we reach the core insight of the holophase language, the semantic tri-unity. This is where we learn that reality does not speak in one dimension at a time. It always speaks in chords, never in isolated notes. For a long time, human thought has trained us to separate what never truly comes apart. We measure the frequency of a sound and call that time. We draw the outline of a crystal and call that space. We track the path of a rocket and call that motion. This way of analyzing the world is extremely powerful. It allows precision and specialized understanding. But it carries a hidden danger. It invites us to believe that there really is such a thing as pure time, pure space, or pure motion, existing independently, like ingredients on a shelf. The holophase language gently but firmly breaks that illusion. In any real pattern of phi, you never encounter time by itself, or space by itself, or motion by itself. You always encounter the tri-unity. The three are braided into one expression. If you try to keep only one strand, the rope of reality falls apart in your hands. You can feel this immediately with a simple example. Imagine a single musical note played on a violin. Can you have the pitch without the vibration of the instrument and the air? Can you have the vibration without the sound traveling to your ear? The pitch, the shape of the vibration, and the way it propagates are not separate events. There are three aspects of one thing happening. If you remove any one of them, the experience collapses. In the language of phi, a stable pattern is a particular configuration across the entire derivative tree. That configuration is too rich to see directly, so it shows itself to us through three windows at once. When we look through the temporal window, we call what we see time. When we look through the spatial window, we call what we see space. When we look through the kinematic window, we call what we see motion. These three windows are three projections of one underlying semantic object. A useful picture is the shadow analogy. Imagine a three-dimensional object, for example, a simple cube. Shine a bright light on it from three different directions, from above, from the side, and from the front. On three separate walls, you will see three different shadows. Each one is flat, each one looks like a square, and each one is truly related to the cube. But none of them is the cube, and no single one tells the full story. Only by understanding that all three belong to the same object can you reconstruct the solid. In the holophase, the full pattern of phi is like the cube. Our experiences of time, space, and motion are like the three shadows. When we listen only at a point, we measure the temporal fingerprint, the omega story, the beat of change. That is the time shadow. When we look at a moment across space, we see the gradients, the curvature, the arrangement. That is the space shadow. When we track how features move from place to place, we see velocity, acceleration, and paths. That is the motion shadow. The profound insight is that all three shadows are cast at once by the same underlying pattern. Change the object in even a small way, and eventually all three shadows are affected. Let us make this more concrete by walking through some examples of semantic triples. Start with the laser beam. From the time perspective, the laser has an extremely pure frequency. Its story is a steady, monochromatic rhythm, oscillating again and again with almost perfect regularity. From the space perspective, the laser has a particular transverse profile, often close to a smooth, bell-shaped beam, bright in the center and fading toward the edges. This form declares, I am collimated, coherent, narrow. From the motion perspective, the beam travels in a straight line through empty space at the speed of light, or it bends in a precise way when it passes from air into glass. This is its action, the way it journeys. If you change the color of the laser, you have changed its temporal projection. But that new frequency will interact differently with matter, changing how the beam focuses and how it moves through different materials. If you reshape the beam into a donut profile with a dark center, you have changed the spatial projection. That new shape will have different stability and different motion properties. The full identity of the laser is the triple: its rhythm, its form, and its journey woven together. Now consider a planet in orbit around its star. From the time side, the planet has a period: 1 year for Earth, nearly 12 for Jupiter. This rhythm is the beat of its path. From the space side, the orbit is an ellipse of a particular size and shape, almost circular in some cases, more stretched in others. This is the geometric declaration of the relationship between the planet and its star. From the motion side, the planet speeds up near the star and slows down far away, sweeping out equal areas in equal times. This is the verb of its motion, obeying the gravitational grammar. Once again, the three cannot be chosen independently. If you decide the period must change, then the size of the orbit and the velocity profile must also change to remain a valid solution of the gravitational constraint chains. The tri-unity here is not a poetic idea. It is a strict rule. The allowed triples are orbits. Everything else is forbidden. Look as well at a nerve impulse traveling along an axon. Its temporal meaning is a sharp spike of voltage that rises quickly and falls more slowly over a few milliseconds. Its spatial meaning is a localized region of changed electrical state along the length of the cell, with a certain width. Its motion meaning is a pulse that travels down the axon at a fixed speed without dying out. Alter the ion channels in the membrane and you change the time profile. This, in turn, changes the propagation speed and even the minimum spacing between spikes. Once again, the story, the form, and the journey are intertwined. Behind all these examples stands a deeper structure: the constraint chains. These are the mathematical relationships that tie omega, k, and v, along with all higher derivatives, into one self-consistent whole. For waves in a given medium, the dispersion relation connects frequency and wave number and fixes how the envelope of a wave packet moves. For orbiting bodies, the gravitational field equations connect curvature of space, distribution of mass, and acceleration. For reaction diffusion systems, equations connect concentration gradients, reaction rates, and front speeds. In plain language, these constraints are the grammar rules that ensure that the three shadows can actually come from one object. A proposed triple that violates the constraints is like three shadows that cannot belong to any real solid. You can write it down, but the universe will not perform it. The holistic pattern of phi enforces consistency. From the viewpoint of dimensional expression, the semantic tri-unity is not an extra decoration. It is the foundation. When you say that something is fully expressed in the temporal dimension, You are really saying that its time projection is coherent with its space and motion projections. When you say that a form is stable in space, you are also implying that its temporal behavior and its kinematic possibilities are compatible. When you speak of a motion as meaningful and lawful, you are invoking the time and space structure that makes that motion possible. In the master tree, the semantic triunity sits at the apex of the entire dimensional semanticity tower. Below it, we study time, space, and motion as separate pillars. Here, we acknowledge that those pillars are cross-braced and fused. The triunity is the meta-principle that says, to specify a complete holophase semantic identity, you must specify the triple. Anything less is an outline, not a full character. This idea has precise consequences for how we model the world. A coherent description of a real phenomenon must succeed in all three dimensions at once. If a theory predicts the timing of an event correctly, but fails to predict its spatial form or its motion, then it has not captured the true holophase identity of that event. Similarly, a computer simulation that reproduces the shape of a pattern, but not its frequency or its propagation behavior, is missing part of the semantic triple. The semantic meaning of the tri-unity, then, is the meaning of wholeness. The universe does not speak in bare rhythms, bare shapes, or bare trajectories. It speaks in full sentences that have when, what, and how. In human language, you might say that time is like tense and rhythm, space is like the arrangement of nouns and adjectives, and motion is like the verbs and their adverbs. A complete sentence needs all three roles. In the holophase language, a complete entity needs a coherent triple. This wholeness can be coherent or incoherent. A coherent triple is one where the three aspects of an entity fit together according to the grammar. A heart with a healthy beat, a robust structure, and a well-directed flow of blood has a coherent triple. An incoherent triple is one you might write on a page that cannot exist in reality. For example, a tiny dust grain with the heartbeat of a whale and the orbital motion of a planet. The constraints of phi will not support such a combination. The claim of tri-unity is testable. It predicts that for any robust, stable phenomenon, you can find strong links between its temporal patterns, its spatial organization, and its kinematic behavior. It also predicts that trying to change one of these arbitrarily will usually have consequences for the others. When engineers alter the shape of an aircraft wing, they are changing a spatial pattern. That change alters the airflow, which changes forces, and that reshapes the motion of the plane for the same engine rhythms. Time, space, and motion all shift together. You see triunities all across nature. A photon can be characterized by a frequency, a wave vector, and a speed that are tightly linked. An electron spiraling in a magnetic field has a cyclotron frequency, a circular orbit radius, and a helical drift, all determined by the same basic quantities. A black hole has quasi-normal modes that describe how it rings in time, a horizon geometry that describes its spatial structure, and families of geodesics that describe how matter and light move near it. In each case, the three projections are sewn together by the deep equations. The same pattern appears in chemistry, where a reaction diffusion wave is defined by its front speed, its concentration profile, and its repetition period if it oscillates. In biology, a heartbeat is a triple of rhythm, anatomical form, and propagating electrical waves. In engineering, an aeroplane in flight is a triple of engine cycles, airframe geometry, and flight path. In all these fields, practitioners may not use the word tri-unity, but they constantly work with the reality of linked time, space, and motion. Human life, too, is steeped in such triples. A film has editing rhythm and soundtrack timing, visual composition and set design, and camera movements and character motions. A city has daily and yearly cycles, a layout of roads and buildings, and flows of people, goods, and information. Your own day has a schedule in time, a set of environments you occupy, and a pattern of movements and actions. Change one, and the others rarely remain untouched. You can practice seeing semantic tri-unity in simple scenes. Watch a waterfall. Listen to the steady roar and the small fluctuations of sound. That is the temporal aspect. Look at the cliff, the arc of the falling water, the shape of the pool. That is the spatial aspect. Track the downward rush, the splashing, the swirling currents. That is the motion aspect. The waterfall is the chord of all three together. Now imagine the rock face slowly eroding and changing shape. The sound and the flow will change as well. The triple evolves as one. Or stand in a room with a ceiling fan. Hear the steady beat of the blades cutting through the air. See the circular blur above you. Feel the motion of air on your skin. Rhythm, form, and action are fused into a single simple machine. A small practical exercise can make this vivid. Take a pendulum, or improvise one with a string and a weight. Set it swinging, and pay attention first only to its rhythm, counting the time between passes. Then, focus only on the spatial arc, the width and height of its swing. Then, attend only to its motion, feeling how it is fastest in the middle and slowest at the ends. Finally, hold all three in your awareness at once. When you do, the pendulum stops being a dot on a graph and becomes a living tri-unity, a story unfolding, a shape traced, and an action performed. If you want to see the detailed mathematics underlying these ideas, you can search for Holophase on Zenodo, where the technical papers behind this audio journey are freely available. There, the tri-unity is written not in stories, but in equations. Here, our aim is to feel its essence in the world around us and within us. Yet this way of seeing does more than satisfy philosophical curiosity. It gives you a practical tool for reading reality. Whenever you face a situation, you can ask three simple questions. What is the rhythm here? What is the form here? What is the action here? A relationship that looks stuck in time almost always has a spatial and emotion component as well. The physical arrangements of people and places, and the patterns of behavior that either reinforce the stuckness or loosen it. A technology that seems new in its function has a timing aspect, a design aspect, and a usage pattern, all linked. To truly understand anything, from a machine to a community, you must ask in all three dimensions at once. Imagine, for example, a busy railway station. If you listen with your eyes closed, you hear the temporal layer, the announcements, the arriving and departing trains, the pulses of footsteps, the rush hours and quiet periods. If you then open your eyes but stand still, you see the spatial layer, the tracks, the platforms, the signage, the arrangement of shops and exits. Finally, if you watch for a while, you feel the motion layer, the streams of people, the stopping and starting of trains, the way crowds curve and split around obstacles. This station is not just a place. It is a tri-unity of timetables, architecture, and flows. A change in one inevitably affects the others. A delayed train reshapes the motion of the crowd and changes the soundscape. A new staircase changes how people move and how long they wait. You can apply the same tri-unity lens inwardly, to your own inner life. Your emotional states have a rhythm. Waves of mood that rise, crest, and fall over hours, days, or months. They also have a spatial form inside your body. Tightness in the chest, looseness in the shoulders, openness or constriction in the belly and throat. And they have a motion pattern, impulses to approach, to withdraw, to freeze, to act. When you are anxious, the time projection might be rapid, repetitive thought. The space projection might be a contracted posture. The motion projection might be restless pacing. When you are calm, the time projection is slower, more spacious. The space projection is open. The motion projection is gentle and flowing. Your inner world, too, is a chord of meaning. Seen through the holophase lens, even simple intentions become triunities. Suppose you decide to learn a new skill. The temporal aspect is the schedule you keep, the regularity with which you practice. The spatial aspect is the environment you create, where you sit, what is on your desk, how your tools are arranged. The motion aspect is the way your body and attention move during practice, the gestures you repeat, the sequences you refine, the errors you correct. If any one of these dimensions is neglected, the learning process suffers. A perfect timetable with a chaotic workspace and distracted, unfocused motion will not carry you far. A beautiful studio with no rhythm of practice also fails. The Tri-Unity reminds you that real change is always three-dimensional. We can even see semantic Tri-Unity in the way we tell stories. A story always has a temporal structure, a beginning, a middle, an end, or a looping episodic rhythm. It always has a spatial setting, the locations, the landscapes, the rooms where events unfold. And it always has motion, the actions of characters, the journeys they take, the decisions they make. Good storytelling aligns these three so that the pacing, the places, and the actions resonate. Confusing storytelling often fails because one of the three is out of tune. The timing feels wrong for the places and events. The locations do not fit the actions, or the characters' movements do not match the rhythm being promised. When you learn to feel triunity, you become more sensitive to disharmony. The semantic triunity also clarifies what we mean by a complete scientific measurement. To fully characterize a phenomenon, we need temporal data, spatial data, and motion data. In practice, experiments often specialize. Some measure only timing, some only structure, some only trajectories. The holophase view does not dismiss these partial views, but it gently insists that the full picture requires bringing them together. In the holophase program, this shows up as the demand that any proposed model of a system be tested simultaneously along time, space, and motion axes, with each axis constrained by the same underlying phase dynamics. This is what elevates the framework from metaphor to a precise, falsifiable science. At a deeper level, the Tri-Unity invites a different attitude toward multiplicity. Instead of thinking, this system has many unrelated properties, you can think, this system is one semantic identity that looks different along three fundamental projections. This can soften the feeling that reality is fragmented and help the mind rest in a more unified intuition. It becomes easier to see that the clock on the wall, the pattern of shadows on the floor, and the way people are walking through the room are not three unrelated phenomena, but three different ways phi is currently expressing itself in that space. There is also a gentle humility hidden in the Tri-Unity. It reminds us that any single description we give is always partial. If we only describe how something looks, we miss how it moves and how it evolves. If we only describe how something changes in time, we miss its embodiment. The Tri-Unity does not scold us for partial views. It simply keeps whispering, there is more. Do not stop at one projection. A final personal exercise can help anchor this understanding. The next time you take a simple walk outside, turn the walk into a Tri-Unity meditation. First, notice the temporal layer, your footsteps as a beat, the cycles of your breath, the passing of shadows as clouds move. Second, notice the spatial layer, the shapes of trees and buildings, the geometry of paths and crossings, the distances and angles that structure where you can go. Third, notice the motion layer, the swing of your arms, the changes in your speed, the way you navigate around people or obstacles. Then, for a few moments, hold all three together in awareness and recognize that your walk is not just a path, not just a rhythm, not just a movement. It is a single, unified expression of you as a tri-unity interacting with the tri-unity of the environment. When you begin to live with this awareness, the semantic tri-unity stops being an abstract concept and becomes a way of seeing. Time, space, and motion no longer feel like separate categories. They become three colors that are always blended in every scene, three tones that are always sounding in every experience. You start to feel that the universe is indeed speaking in chords, and that your life is one of those chords, rich with overtones, endlessly modulating, yet held together by an underlying coherent theme. We have now reached the summit of this chapter. We can finally say, with precision and with feeling, that the holophase language is not just a way of talking about energy or fields, but a way of understanding meaning itself as tridimensional. In Episode 7, we climbed from the basic letters of change to the way stable words form, to the rules that decide which words endure, and now to the realization that every enduring word is written in three intertwined scripts at once. We return, as always, to phi. The semantic tri-unity is not something we have imposed on the field from outside. It is the way the field naturally expresses itself when it is read through the lenses of time, space, and motion. Phi does not whisper in one narrow channel. It sings in chords. Every stable pattern in phi is a chord with a particular temporal note, spatial note, and kinematic note. To know that pattern is to hear and see and feel all three together. To understand the semantic tri-unity is to realize that to be is to be a chord in the symphony of phi. To persist is to hold that chord, resisting noise and disruption. To live is to be a complex, evolving progression of chords, an unfolding melody of triples resonating through the field. Now, as you listen to these words, notice your own tri-unity. There is the rhythm of your breath and your heartbeat. There is the shape of your body and the room you are in. There is the gentle motion of your chest rising and falling, your eyes moving, perhaps your fingers touching a screen. You are not a point. You are a living semantic triple, nested inside countless other triples, all woven into the infinite language of phi. Peace be upon you.